Iran's foreign minister has called on the U.S. to comply with its obligations under the 2015 nuclear deal before asking Iran to do so. In a tweet, Mohammad Javad Zarif said that Washington withdrew from the international accord back in 2018 and punished countries which were complying with the UN resolution which endorsed the deal. He added that President Joe Biden's administration is still on the same page but keeps talking about Iran's compliance with the nuclear accord. As comments come amid a standoff between Tehran and Washington, with each asking the other to act first to salvage the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Joining us now for this news review is Tony Gosling, investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol, and E. Michael Jones, editor at Culture Wars online magazine from South Bend, Oregon. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program. Mr. Michael Jones, I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts on this impasse we're seeing with respect to the JCPOA between Washington and Tehran.
Well, I think we have to understand that the goal has always been to destroy Iran, one way or the other. And I think the Democrats had an idea that if over the long haul we could simply subvert the entire country with things like the color revolution of 2009, the failed color revolution of 2009. And if they could gain time and they could gain access, I think they felt that they could bring about the fall of the revolutionary government. Now, what has happened here is we have 4 years now of a man who came to power, Donald Trump, by telling us he was going to withdraw from the Middle East. Never really accomplished that. And in a contradiction to that policy, which was the America First policy, he tightened the screws on Iran and overturned the JCPOA. So the question is, what has happened in this 4 years? What has happened to the Democrats? And it seems to me it should be obvious that when Biden got in, he should overthrow all of Trump's policies. But apparently there's hesitation now. So whether the Democrats have now gone over to the hard line, the Likudnik hard line, is something that we have to anticipate here. Maybe this is the change that's taken place over these 4 years.
Thank you. And Tony, I'd like to welcome you to the program, bud. Tony, your thoughts on the prospects of how the JCPOA is going to play out in the months to come?
Well, okay, so let's not forget that Biden did promise that he was going to do everything he could to get back into the JCPOA. Now, obviously, saying that he's not going to do anything until the Iranians come back into compliance, which he's now saying he's not doing everything to get back into it. I mean, he's not even really trying to get back in right now, it seems. So I think this is just the usual stuff we get from politicians, where they say one thing before an election and they say something different after an election, because I think essentially the policy from the US and almost all the Middle East, including, of course, all the areas around the Middle East and in Afghanistan and places like that, mostly Muslim countries, is on a ratchet system. It only goes in one direction. And I can say that the similar sort of thing is going on here in the UK with any professionals or in almost any area, including education, journalism, that are pro-Palestinian, find themselves, and by the way, of course, in politics, in political parties, find themselves bullied and harassed and harangued, either by the media or by legal means, as I have done and others have done, and sacked and taken out of the profession. So there's an enormously powerful lobby which is pro-US, pro-Israel, and basically a Christian Zionist and Jewish Zionist project. But if you're not behind that, it doesn't go anywhere. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about a ratchet. So the policy only goes in one direction, because anybody that opposes it, any specific individuals, they don't have any freedom. They are just marginalized and bullied, as we saw, for example, with pro-Palestinian leader of the opposition, leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn in Britain. So this ratchet is only like a one-way thing. And of course, in the other direction, there's lots and lots of money, in fact, almost infinite amounts. I was reading recently that it's $150 billion that's been going since the Second World War to Israel in total. Of course, we know it's around about $4 billion every year. But this is basically a funding project. The US is funding Israel as its own, what you might call military project in the Middle East, very much like we saw the Crusades back in the Middle Ages. And without that money coming in, Israel can't be there and can't be putting pressure on Iran. And actually what I think is attempting to cause a religious war in the Middle East. Now, whether they will actually manage it, hopefully the world will wake up before any such war happens. But this is, I'm afraid, where we are. It's a ratchet. It's only in one direction, and it's all towards conflict between Israel and Iran, which is a terrible thing since we've seen what devastation has been caused in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, and all the places which are there putting pressure on the Arabs, putting pressure on Muslims from the Christian Zionists, mainly led by the United States and their money.
Thank you, Tony. And Mr. Jones, your thoughts on Tony's narrative there that this is all just a pressure cooker, ratchet policy for conflict between Iran and a regional adversary?
Yeah, I think that there's a ratchet effect. I agree with that. The only question is, how far has the ratchet effect gone now? And the question now is the JCPOA obsolete from the point of view of the United States deep state, since they're the ones who will be calling the shots for Biden? Okay, they will come in through his earpiece. He doesn't make these decisions. He will get it through his earpiece. Okay, but the point here is the other side of the coin is, has it become obsolete from the point of view of the Iranians? Because what has happened over this 4-year period of time is that it's the worst nightmare, according to Mr. McKinder, because Trump's reckless policy of Israel first has driven the Eurasian landmass into the countries of the Eurasian landmass into each other's arms. And the best example of this is the train showing up from Beijing. The train from Beijing just pulled into Tehran. And now we are faced with the prospect of this alliance here between Iran and China, and Iran, China, and Russia, that may very well make the JCPOA unnecessary. These are the calculations that are going through people's minds at this point, and we are not privy to their discussions because they don't want us to know. But I think that's a relevant question.
Thank you. And Tony, we have about a minute left. Your final thoughts, please.
Yeah, I think it's very important to look at the future of this joint comprehensive plan of action, the Iran nuclear deal. I think Iran is taking the best policy, really, which is to do everything it can to bend over backwards to allow the United States to save face and return to the agreement. Now, what that means is not doing everything the US says, but it's moving towards that. And I think that there is it's important now, where we've got this so-called new Biden administration, although, of course, it's the same deep state in charge, that's what they do. And it gives the Americans no excuse not to get involved in this. Meanwhile, of course, we've got all sorts of other problems in the world economically to do with COVID-19. And that much of that, I think, has been caused by the United States. If you look at the Fox News report from a couple of weeks ago, and I think we're dealing with the great provocateurs. That's who the United States are now. And the best way to deal with a bully is to do everything you can to comply. And then if they make a mistake, then make sure it costs them.
All right, gentlemen, always a pleasure to have both of you on and get your respective perspectives on things. Thank you both. Stay safe till we see both of you again. Tony Gosling out of Bristol and E. Michael Jones, editor at Culture Wars Online magazine, joining us out of South Bend. And viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your Press TV's News Review program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.